Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to Rule the Waves. It's 1916, we're playing as Japan, and the game has about 9 years left. I was kind of wondering if this series will end up being somewhat anticlimactic when you consider the fact that we have had a few wars, but nothing too dramatic in the way of battles yet. I'm hoping we may end up seeing a dramatic battle, and obviously you can see here we've got several countries that we could very easily end up at war with. At least with the case of Russia, France, and the U.S., I wouldn't want to fight the British. But with regards to France, they've only got one battleship in service with three building. They do have three battle cruisers, but I think we compare fairly well to the French. We've got four battle cruisers. They've got six, so they outnumber us somewhat there. But we've got four battleships building, and they've only got one in service with three more building. So we're outnumbered, but not dramatically so. It's 10-8. With regards to Russia, it's, on pace to be 9-8, more heavily on the battlecruiser side, which I'm okay with because battleships can take more of a pounding. The U.S. I wouldn't want to go to war with. They've got, good lord, they've got 16 ships either built or building. But at least if you look at the map, especially regards to the U.S., they've got some Pacific colonies that'll make them more difficult to deal with. They'll a bigger challenge. France is less directly dealing with Japan. They do have some colonies in Southeast Asia, but they're underdeveloped and can't support massive ships. The biggest risk with France is our Angola colony would be at serious risk of being overrun. I'm still really smarting about the American conquest of North Korea. Wouldn't mind fighting the Americans just to take North Korea from them in the post-war treaty if we ever won a war in a way that we could actually take some territory, because we haven't yet. But anyway, going back to where we're at here, it is 1916, and I was thinking about doing a rebuild on our Naga class. They're 5 years old now. I didn't realize that the later two ships built in America in 1913, at least they were modernized then. But the original design of 1911 seems to be starting to fall out of date. So I was looking at doing a rebuild, and you could replace the machinery, and there you go, you free up 100 tons of space. That 100 tons isn't enough to allow you to increase the speed. Although if you drop the engine priority down to normal, I suppose you could increase the speed to 27 knots, which looks like, yeah, you could do that. Or you could add some additional armor to the turrets and secondaries. Additionally, I was thinking about maybe regunning them because they only have 12-inch guns. But the problem when you look at doing that is if you look at the design here, you won't actually see that here. But if you try and increase the caliber here of the main guns and you go to check this, there's a rebuild error. Because basically in this game, if you have an 11 or a 12-inch turret, you can upgun them to 14 or 15-inch turrets. But you can only take a triple turret and bring it into a double, or take a double turret and bring it to a single. So basically, if you're increasing the caliber on these turrets because of the way the ships are designed, then you have to shrink the number of guns by one, which would be fine on the forward turrets. I wouldn't mind dropping a 3 battery turret down to a double to increase the caliber to, say, 14 inches. But I don't want to do that on the wings. I don't want to have a single gun turret on the wings. That seems like a waste. We'd drop our ship from having a broadside of eight guns to having only 5, and I'm not sure if the additional shell weight would really be worth it. I don't think it would be. So that's a little bit frustrating. So in that case, I don't really think there's much point in rebuilding the Naga. Sure, we could maybe increase the speed by a knot and decrease the reliability, but I want to keep those battle cruiser engines very reliable so they can run at high speeds constantly. I think that's more important for a battle cruiser, which may be out on raiding missions or remotely stationed, versus the battleships that would be less important. If we look at some of our older battleships, I thought, well, maybe we'll go ahead and we'll redesign them. But then I realized, with the same restrictions on upgunning our ships, these are already 9-inch guns. We'd have to shrink our main battery even more. Granted, we have a secondary battery of 8-inchers, but I don't think it would be worth it. Our most modern pre-Dreadnought battleship class, if we look at that, similar deal. We've got 6 main guns on this ship of 9 inches. Do we really want to drop those down to single-turreted 8-inch guns? I don't think there'd be any point in that. They're already relatively slow. They actually underperformed. The design was for 19 knots, and they only end up turning out 18 knots as far as the actual real-life design. So, we could just replace the machinery, and that additional weight freed up may allow them to hit their design speed. Or we could, again, drop the engine priority and maybe make them hit 20 knots with a really unreliable engine, but that doesn't seem to be worth much if you've got an engine that can hit 20 knots but breaks down half the time. And I don't think 1 knot is worth the expense of rebuilding the ships, so I don't think I'll do that. On the heavy cruisers, these I don't think I'll re-gun. They've got a crazy strong main armament of 9-inch guns, like 18 of them. I don't want to drop them to 8-inch guns and reduce the number of guns on the ship. That wouldn't be worth it. It might be worth replacing the machinery and increasing their speed up to 26 knots or so. They're already pretty darn fast. They're basically semi-battle cruisers. So these guys, I imagine, will stay in service for a while. But as far as needing to do anything right now, I'm not sure 1 knot is worth pulling them out and the cost it would entail. So I don't think I'm going to rebuild my heavy cruisers, at least not at this point, maybe at some point down the line. We've got a little bit of money to play with. We could build some additional ships. We've got some destroyers coming off the line as well. And when I look at our fleet, when I do a fleet analysis, I can see here we've got 40 destroyers with 8 in construction, so we'll have 48. That puts us in a pretty healthy relationship. Other countries have more destroyers or less, but I think destroyers are important for our fleet, especially when you consider we're not going to be able to compete on heavy battleships, not with our fleet budget. But what we might do, rather than build a whole new series of destroyers, I don't want to have to build 10 destroyers at all times to keep them modern. We could do a redesign on some of these older destroyers. We've got a relatively new destroyer fleet. We only have, 6 destroyers, 10 destroyers or so that are 1907s, and then you've got 1908s, and, I think it's a fairly healthy destroyer fleet, but maybe we'll redesign some of these guys. But my main concern is the cruiser fleet. I think a big part of playing as Japan is you're not going to be able to maintain parity on battleships. You may be able to have local superiority in the Pacific, but as far as being able to maintain that Angola colony or win a war against the Western powers, a big part of it is your ability to kind of attrit their forces through constant cruiser action. And one thing that we found out was that our cruisers were a little undergunned in previous conflicts. Or that we didn't have enough of them, or that they were too slow, so that if they got engaged, they couldn't retreat. If you got engaged by a heavier force, you need to be able to pull out. So I think what we'll do is we'll look at the Kasagi class, for example. This was one of my heavy light cruiser designs. What I mean by that is it was designed to be able to pack a punch. You see it's got 8 7-inch guns, which for a light cruiser, that's pretty darn heavy. Those are heavy cruiser armaments, at least Washington Naval Treaty heavy cruiser armaments. And it had 8 of them. And then it had 10 5-inch guns, so very well armored. The armor's a little bit light, but very well armed, I guess is what I mean, as well as some torpedoes. So this is an ideal raider. But I don't want to go through and have to design a whole new class of ships. Our newest heavy cruisers are actually less armored, but they're faster. So they're more of a, you quickly rate, jump in, and jump out. So my thought is maybe we just we rebuild these ships. They have an O next to them. They're listed as obsolete because they're over 10 years old. But I think if we redesign them, because of the quality of the original design, I think it might be worth redesigning them. So let's take a look here. You can see we have a 7 caliber gun. Again, if we increase that, I don't know if we can increase that, actually. What happens if I do that? Yeah, so you can't upgun out of a single turret, it doesn't look. So since we don't have double turrets, that limits our ability to... yes? Ooh, is that allowed? Oh, sweet! I didn't realize that. So apparently, what you can actually do is you can upgrade the quality of your gun. So before we had a 7-inch gun with a -1 quality, it wasn't as good. Now we have a 7-inch gun with a quality of 0. So we actually have a better 7-inch gun now than when we built this ship. So that's a big upgrade. I don't know the exact details as far as the breakdown of max range versus penetration, but the quality 0 guns are much superior to the -1. So that's a big upgrade to be able to do to this ship. I think also we can replace the machinery. You can see, wow, we just freed up 500 tons just by replacing machinery on a ship that's 10 years old. So that frees up 500 tons. So what we can do here is we can upgrade the quality of the turrets, say to 4-inch turrets. We want to make sure that the armor on these turrets is sufficient, and I do think, yep, we can do that. So we can increase the armor thickness on the turrets. So we also want to put 2 inches on the secondary turrets as well. So now our secondaries, which we have 10 secondary turrets as well. No, I'll at least have 2-inch turrets rather than nothing. Before they were just operating around basically blast shields, which is really important when you consider the fact that high explosive shells and things like that can really damage your ability to fight effectively in a gunfight. So we can increase the armor on our turrets as well as our secondary guns. But if we do that, actually, it limits our ability to increase speed. So we jump up 100, or we jump up a knot. I was hoping we could get 2 knots more, but that doesn't look like that's going to be possible. What if maybe we drop 2 of our secondary guns? I'm assuming we can do that. So we can drop 2 secondary guns. So now we only have 8 secondary 5-inch guns, which I think is okay. That's a relatively decent sacrifice to make. That improves the weight a bit. Let's see. Maybe we only have 3.5-inch turrets. What about 3-inch turrets? Still not enough weight. Turret top 2 inches. You need that to stop plunging fire. 1.5 inches. I wish I could add just a little bit of weight to the ship, but you can't increase the overall tonnage. I suppose you could take off 4 5-inch guns, but then that really does sacrifice your combat ability, I would say. It's 2 per broadside. So you still have 3 secondaries on each side. Plus you've got 3, so... Just kind of mumbling through this and debating what the best method is. We can make it only increase 1 knot to 25 knots, and then we could still have that. Well, maybe 1 inch is enough on the secondaries. Really? Even that much? So if we just keep the secondaries completely unarmored, here's the problem though, is unarmored secondaries are probably worthless. I mean, I imagine those get destroyed really easily in combat. Sorry, I'm just kind of trying to figure this out here. What if we drop the ammo down a bit? There, we can do that. So if we drop the main ammo by about 30 rounds, that makes sense. Okay, so we drop the main ammo magazines by about 30 rounds. We can still have an inch turret on our secondaries. I'm hoping that's enough. And then increase the main turrets from 2 to 3 inches as well. Not sufficient against main direct hits by most types of shells, but definitely sufficient against high explosive shells. Meanwhile, what if we drop that? Just kind of trying to play around with things here. 105 rounds, is that enough? Yeah, okay. So it'll tell you if your ammo's too low. That's why I'm kind of checking that there. So there you go. So we'll drop the main battery down to 105 rounds per gun. We'll increase the secondary armor to 2 inches, which should be sufficient against high explosive shells. The main turrets are still a little bit lightly armored, but that way we still have 8. We only reduced our secondary guns by 2, and we increased our ship's speed to 26 knots. So we get a lot faster, which makes us more escapable. We keep those reliable engines. We maintain our firepower, actually get better main guns by increasing the quality, and add a bit of armor. So I say that's a pretty substantial upgrade. I'm hoping it compares well to other ships. And then we can go ahead and save the Kasagi 1916 redesign and go to the rebuild dialog. So there we go. We've got the Kasagi class as a rebuilt ship. So we're going to go ahead and rebuild the Kasagi there. You can see it's now added into the queue. It'll be, whoa, 2.3 million. Yikes, I didn't realize it was going to be that expensive. It's only going to take 8 months, though. So that's a positive. And once the first one's done, then we'll rebuild the second one. I'm not sure if we want to build a new Kasagi class with the 1916. It's definitely a commerce raider in 1916. Borderline heavy cruiser. We'll wait to redesign the other one as well. So yeah, we're going to need to free up a little bit more cash to do that. These destroyers coming online should allow us to do that. So we'll go ahead and we'll jump forward to the next month. Okay, you can see several destroyers came online. So our financial situation is a little bit better. And since they're only going to take 8 months, I'm going to redesign the other ship as well. We've got a very healthy cash reserve at the moment. So rebuild ship. There. So now we have 2 light cruisers being rebuilt. Take about 8 months each. And as well as a brand new cruiser being finished up as well. Diesel engines. What's a smoke float? Huh. Okay. Under construction. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and just, I guess, jump forward one more turn. An uprising in China makes it necessary to send an expeditionary force. What's your recommendation? Send a strong force. Multinational force. We'll do a multinational force to keep tensions low. Aeon armor. Huh. Okay. Gives full benefits of all or nothing armor layout. No BE or DE. Well, I don't know if that really matters to us. Wow, tensions seem to be kind of slowly rising up again. Italian government is offering to sell us the rights for superimposed turrets on heavy cruisers. Well, we don't really use heavy cruisers right now. So I don't know if we need that. No one's building heavy cruisers anyway. So if we look here, heavy cruisers, no one's building any. So what would the value of those be? I'm not quite sure. Suppose if we wanted to build mini battle cruisers, but we kind of already have that in this Tezuka class. This is I think this ship class will last through the end of the game, honestly. It's heavily armored, fast, bigger than our last class of battleships even. And speaking of that here, I'm debating when we should take all of these ships, and maybe not. We could scrap these guys. The Mikasa class is really kind of... I mean, I don't know if that's why I'm getting so much political backlash, because I'm scrapping our old battleships. It looks like other countries are slowly starting to scrap theirs. Let's see here. I'd say we also want to do a redesign of this destroyer class. We'll see what we can do here to try and save us from having to build whole new ships. You can obviously see redesigns can be expensive, but they take a lot less, so the overall cost is substantially less. So if we take a look at the Murakamo class destroyer here, there's not a lot for us to do. If we can go ahead and replace the machinery. Doesn't really... I guess, yeah, that's what we could do. We can replace the machinery and change the engines to reliable engines, so that way we make sure that those ships don't break down in combat. We had that happen in our previous conflict where we had ships breaking down in battles, and that could be a pretty difficult thing to deal with. So go ahead and we'll redesign that. We've got a lot of Mermenko classes, and that way we can fully modernize those ships to all the modern equipment, as well as making sure that they have reliable engines. Go ahead and rebuild them all. So we gotta do them one at a time. That's annoying. Rebuild. I imagine the destroyer rebuilds don't take too long. They don't. They only take 8 months. Again, it's just sort of a modernization to make sure that these ships remain serviceable for more than, 10 years. That's something that you see a lot in modern navies. You didn't see it quite as much back around this time period. There was some rebuilding of capital ships to some extent. Lighter ships, you didn't see it as much. Ships today, because of the way that the importance is really around technology, are much more moddable. Where in the past, a lot of the designs were designed for specific size guns. So if you try to increase, the main guns on a warship, it would increase the stress on the frame, and it would make the ship less. Well, it wasn't really possible. It wasn't designed to deal with those kind of stresses, and as a result, they didn't last quite as long, especially in modern times where you had, huge changes going on in military designs, like you did around this time period. But again, trying to save some capital, modernize some of these destroyers. They won't be quite as fast as the other ones, but I think they're still useful at 27 knots. So, yeah. That gives us negative 2 million, but we've got 50 million in funds, so we should be fine. We'll go ahead and jump forward another month. Conservatives are reporting that our Navy is pathetically weak in battleships. Okay. A revolution in Chinese province has left some of our nationals stranded. We could join an international squadron, resolve the crisis via diplomatic means, which would lower tensions, or send a strong naval squadron that would dramatically increase tensions across the board. I've got 30 prestige. I think it's time to take a prestige hit of -1 to try and lower some of these tensions, which we just did. Unrest level did pop up a bit with that as well. I'm constantly confused how our funds keep going up despite the monthly balance going down. Doesn't quite make sense to me. Government concerned about tensions leading to war. You've been called to give advice. What do you recommend? Safeguard our interests by negotiating an agreement with... Who do we negotiate an agreement with? Italy? The treaty negotiated with Italy. Sweet. So we're now allies with Italy, apparently. We have or at least we have a treaty with Italy. I don't know if we're allies, and you can see the tensions on them drop down to 0 or 3. Meanwhile, tensions with everyone else bump up a little bit because of our agreement with Italy. So kind of a World War I situation where alliances can lead to tensions. Ooh, oil has been discovered in Angola. That's cool. The Italian government's interested in buying the right to the gyro stabilizer. By all means, you are our friends. Why not? 3.7 million. Okay, so we've got almost $60 million in the bank. I think it is 1916 still. Our gamer class is probably, I wouldn't call it obsolete, but we can probably do better, especially now that we can build up to 37,000 tons. So by the time this class of ships comes online, we're going to have a much more modern class under construction. Let's see here. Unrest is increasing, which is a little frustrating. I think that's because the constant strain over battleships. I'd like a more balanced fleet. That's the difficulty, is I want a fleet that's balanced, and I just don't have that. And yet people are upset because our fleet is too small. So I think the next step is going to be building a new battleship class. So like if we design a new ship class, let's see what we can do here. Local yard, auto design ship of a BB class. I just want to see what it does. It'll put 14-inch guns, triple turrets, a centerline triple turret. That's weird. A midship triple turret. No, thank you. Let's add a aft centerline superimposed. Whoa, not what I wanted. Okay. Aft superimposed triple turret. Okay, that's a more palatable design to me. This is 32 forward superimposed. We're going to have as a triple as well. So that'll give us a 12-gunned, kind of very traditional 14-inch gun type ship. Heavy armor across the board. I mean, we could increase speed as well. We've got to increase displacement. So if we increase it to, say, 35,000 tons, that solves our weight issue. It can still be 22 knots, which will match the gamer class. So that'll kind of be the high end of our ships. I'm sure it'll be much more expensive, but it'll have, 4 more guns, main guns, as well as the 14-inch side. More heavy armor, I think, than the gamer class. Increase the torpedo defense to 2. So it'll have better torpedo defense as well. Kind of curious. Tried to bump it up to, say, 26 knots. Could we do that? That's just kind of what I'm wondering. 37,000 tons is the biggest we can build. So we can't build a 26 knot ship. Can't even design 25. We could do 24. We could have a 24 knot ship with these layouts. But I'm not sure it's worth that. I say 22 knots might be best. You save some displacement, which is going to save you some cost. And it stays in line with our gamer class ships, so that way our main battle fleet has a standardized speed. So I guess we'll go with the Shimo class. It's going to cost almost $4 million a month to build. But we've got some ships coming off the way soon, so this is going to put us way in the red. First class of the ship costs $7 million. So we're almost $7 million in the red. We've got $52 million in funds. So we'd have less than, we've got 7 months or so of cash that we can fund this project with. Let's see. But within that period of time, some of the gamer classes will start coming online. So we'll be okay money-wise. So we'll go ahead and we'll jump forward. Spy from the U.S. has been discovered. What do we want to do? I don't really want to go to war with the U.S. Caught in Italy. Just as we... Can we change a ship design mid? Doesn't look like we can alter. We could scrap it mid-construction, but we just spent $7 million on the design. So I guess scrapping it's not an option. Well, that's the other thing, is that's a really nice design. That's, if we look at the naval guns, that's a quality 0. So not only is it, see, you can only go out to 15,000 yards and penetrate just shy of 12 inches side, or I assume side penetration, whereas the 15-incher can go out to 20,000 and penetrate 12 inches. It's so much of a better gun. I suppose the Yashiramo can at least be redesigned to carry the 15-incher and sacrifice those triple turrets and redesign them into doubles once it's complete. We could look at doing that. But I think we're going to have to let it finish its construction first. We're only building 2 of them. I suppose we could make a 37,000 ton ship with 15 inchers. Not right now, but maybe in a few years. So look at the almanac here. We've got 6 battleships building, none of them completed yet. They'll start entering service soon. And I think as we enter those into service, we'll retire the old obsolete class at a 1-to-1 ratio. I think it'll be a good plan for that. Basically, they'll pay for the ops cost. Well, not really. 400,000 maintenance cost, so not quite. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump ahead. Scientists made unexpected advances in submarines, so diesel engines on submarines. That's another thing that I think people forget, is sort of the stereotypical sub has a diesel engine during this time period, but actually submarines previous to that had gasoline or want to say there were propane submarines as well. So, anyway. Okay, so we just completed several other ships. We're still big time in the red in terms of unrest levels really increasing. In terms of our monthly balance, I'd be really nervous about going to war right now with our people as unhappy as they are, it seems. But we're into January of 1917. We've got 4 battle cruisers completed. We've got the Gamer class nearing completion. The first one will be done in 1 month. 5 months after that, the second will finish. And we've also got 2 Shirmo class that we just laid down that are about 3 years out. In addition to that, we've redesigned some light cruisers. We've also got some destroyers that are going through rebuilds. You can see those are starting to come off the ways as well. So overall, a fleet modernization program of 1916 is well underway, with the capital ship side of things beginning to expand and modernize. I'm glad we laid those battleships down, though, because you can see here the Italians have 5 battleships and 3 battle cruisers in service, with another 3 under construction, so they'll have 11 to R10. The Americans have 17 to R10. The Russians, however, only have 11 to R11. So we were favorably displaced to fight the Russians. I'd say, or the French. I don't want to fight anyone else, but at least the Russians or the French would be favorably displaced to fight. You can see tensions are slowly rising across the board with everybody, even with Italy, who we have a treaty with. But yeah, I guess we'll see how that happens. Unrest is increasing. We've got very healthy balance in the bank, though. And yeah, that's where we're at in 1917. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.